Welcome to this week's Armchair Adventures with the Z Foundation. This week we're speaking with Erik Weihenmayer, an internationally recognized athlete, author, and adventurer who's also an advisory board member for Z. We're going to be speaking about how disabled communities are coping with the COVID crisis, what's happening in Nepal, and Erik's incredible film, The Weight of Water, about his trip as a blind kayaker down the Grand Canyon. We hope you enjoy this short conversation.
All right. Well, namaste, everybody. I'm Ben Ayers, Senior Nepal Advisor for the Z Foundation in Kathmandu, and I'm here with our esteemed board member and source of tremendous inspiration, Erik Weihenmayer.
Hey.
And Erik, thanks so much for taking some time. And this week we're kind of showcasing the film that Michael Brown made about your trip down the Grand Canyon in a kayak. And really, really inspiring film, as is everything, that you do in your life. And so, Erik, do you want to talk to us a bit about one of the questions I sort of had for you is, in the middle of this COVID situation, the globe is going through similar processes of lockdown. Everyone's kind of getting used to the new normal, but there are subtle differences, and in Nepal, the lockdown's really tight, but rural communities are really facing issues around income and food security. But I know for your experience, as someone who's blind and who has done incredible adventures throughout your life, could you talk to us a little bit about what it's like to be a person with disabilities in the time of COVID-19 and social distancing? What are things that maybe the general population doesn't think about? And are there ways that experience, could help us be more thoughtful? Or, I just would love it if you'd share a bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like me personally, I'm getting by. All my work was canceled, of course. And climbing plans kind of maybe postponed. So yeah, there's that kind of uncertainty for me, but I'm really lucky in terms of, I could just kind of hunker down. There are a lot of people with disabilities that are already isolated. And so this is a really challenging time for them because the situation has just exacerbated their isolation. And when you do that, people get more depressed and it can lead to all kinds of negative outcomes, of course, in terms of anxiety and fear and depression and alcoholism and, domestic abuse and all kinds of crazy stuff. So, I think, all that's just exacerbated for folks with disabilities. Everything everybody's experiencing is just, hyper adrenalized for people with disabilities.
One of the things that you're really well known for is the work that you've done with your charity, No Barriers. What sort of stuff, are you doing right now with the charity, and are you able to address any of those issues with isolation? I mean, usually you use adventure for that. How have you modified that?
Yeah, a lot of our programs are in-person programs. It's like go out and do this big journey and kind of work on your own self-growth in terms of like becoming the best version of yourself. A lot of our folks are stuck on the sidelines to begin with. They've had a bunch of things happen to them, whether it's a disability or whether it's an invisible challenge or a trauma, or just life circumstances, and they've gotten shoved to the sidelines. So they're already on the sidelines, and they're trying to fight their way back into life. We've had to shift over to trying to impact people virtually, like the world is trying to do. So yeah, we're trying to up a bunch of virtual content for middle school kids, for adults, for folks with disabilities. We're doing a podcast called No Barriers. We're trying to just up all the things and scale up all the things that we can do right now. And so that when we come out of this, maybe we'll have a stronger virtual presence and because I think that, it's one thing to kind of just come out of this surviving it. Oh man, I just got through this with the skin of my teeth, which is, by the way, like what most of us may do, but
Right.
it's our, hope that we come out of this in certain ways, like a little bit stronger. Why not come out
Yeah.
a little bit stronger in certain ways? Of course, there are other ways that will come out weaker, but use this time to emerge just a bit stronger or with some kind of new insight that we didn't have before.
Yeah, totally. Are you finding, for you personally, that are there any life lessons that are emerging? Is there anything that you're kind of working on personally through this experience?
Yeah, just this idea that, I just spoke to like Rebecca Rush yesterday for our podcast, and she
Yeah.
is an amazing ultra athlete and, did this incredible journey across Vietnam to find her dad who was killed in the
Yeah,
Vietnam War. It was a beautiful
totally.
film. And
Yeah.
she talks about coming home, and so, yeah, I think we all have to sort of wrestle. Sorry about that. My computer's blabbing at me. I think
No,
we
no worries.
gotta sort of come home in a way and be, a lot of us as adventurers or climbers or whatever, we're out there, looking for the next thing, what's around the corner. And this is
Yeah.
forcing us to come back and just sort of be comfortable with being at home and at peace. Even though there are big challenges in the world, just
Yeah.
finding peace inside. And I thought that Rebecca's message was really powerful the other day.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense. I think, before we started this interview, Eric, you and I were talking about how, or I was talking about how grateful I am to be in Nepal right now, even though I wasn't born here. Nepal has become my home for the past 22 years. And I feel really grateful to be in a place where, connected to my community. I am far from my family in the States, but I do feel like I'm much more aware of my community in this place, and I'm very grateful to be a part of it, even though the challenges in some ways are greater here. Curious about how, I know for you, your son Arjun, was born in Nepal, and you've always had a deep connection to this place. And, in some ways, Nepal has almost been a second home to you. How do you feel, how are you feeling about your connection to Nepal now? I know you had a great adventure there last year. Just curious about how you're thinking about Nepal and adventure and global adventures, in this time when we don't have access to it.
Well, just, a lot of my plans have been canceled and postponed. So you just have to roll with that. But yeah, no, I mean, I've been to Nepal a bunch of times and spent a lot of time there. And I can only imagine that this quarantining, this crisis that we're experiencing, obviously here in the US, is just way worse in Nepal, because, people are some living day to day, and you get quarantined in your house, and man, I mean, you're like talking starvation. You're
Yep.
talking about no way to make a living.
Right.
So I think we're this isn't like a conceptual problem. This is like a real problem that's in our face, and we can't, sorry for the pun, but we can't turn a blind eye to the world right now.
Yeah.
Everyone's just
Yeah,
like hunker
absolutely.
down and just focus on what matters. No, I mean, this is a time to really redouble your value system, because I think our value system is the only thing we have to go on right now. Like, what's that internal compass looks like? So
Yeah.
I would recommend to folks, like, don't change your whole compass right now. Really redouble, double down on the things that really matter to you. And so a lot of folks in our community, Nepal, and the health of the folks in Nepal is a huge value to us. And so, yeah, this is the time to not forget, what people are going through, just because, we happen to be trapped in our houses as well.
Have you? Yeah. What I really appreciate that response. Of the myriad things that you've learned from Nepal in the many trips that you've taken here, is there anything that you feel like is particularly relevant now, or that you're drawing upon now?
Yeah, you know, one of my great memories climbing Everest and way back in 2001 was that a lot of the Sherpas were scared to climb with me as a blind person because of superstition. You know, maybe blind people
Hmm.
are unlucky or something. And one really brave guy, um, uh, Ang Pasang Sherpa, he had climbed Everest 3 times, and he's like, "Look, I mean, I think you make your own karma in life." So he signed up, and then all the other Sherpas signed up, and they were our biggest
Nice.
believers. And heading to the summit, Ang Pasang was right there with me, and I was thinking, this guy doesn't know me all that well. He's walking by my side. He's helping me out. If I, as a blind guy, fall down in the snow and can't get up, it's his ass on the line.
Yeah.
He's responsible, right? And I thought that what a tremendous gift to me for this guy to put his trust in me, and so that's the way I've always thought about Nepal. And I maybe that's overgeneralizing, but
Hmm.
it's like this place with all kinds of challenges, right? Like everything we experience in the US, it's 10 times more intense in Nepal. But at the same time, despite those challenges, there's kind of this hopefulness. There's this kind of innocence and beauty that you see out of people. And that kind of hopefulness makes you realize like that the dreams we have for the future in terms of what life could look like is possible. And so Nepal for me, and maybe I idealize, but it just represents kind of a hopefulness despite these crushing challenges
Yeah.
that you see.
Yeah, I really appreciate that and share that perspective. As a foreigner here, we talk a lot about this idea of resilience, and where does resilience come from? But resilience, I think, sometimes it comes from those crushing challenges, from the fact that people here don't have a choice, and they learn how to rely on one another. They learn how to trust one another because they have to survive. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of real important lessons that we can learn from a place like this, maybe without having necessarily to experience those same challenges ourselves. But there's a
Yeah,
lot
I
for
mean,
the
and that
globe to
inspired
learn.
me for sure. That kind of
Yeah.
hopefulness. Yeah, that inspires me. I mean, that's what inspired me coming back to what you said about adopting my boy Arjun. That's what
Yeah.
motivated me. I was like, look, this is where I want to go. I mean, there's so many kids out there, right? Imagine right now in quarantine, all these kids in orphanages, thousands of them in Nepal or all over the world. I
Yeah.
mean, and so I thought, okay, like I want to take a tiny little dent out of this challenge and get some, bring some love into my family as well in the process. So it was a win-win.
Yeah.
Stephen Covey win-win.
Totally. And it's wonderful, through Arjun, I mean, you and I have met in Kathmandu with him recently, and it's wonderful that through him you have a reason to continue connecting to Nepal, and an excuse to always go back. That's it's I've brought some Nepal into my family too. My fiance's mom is from Nepal, and it's been really wonderful to be able to bring another culture into my family, and into my life on a daily basis. It's really enriching.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, and people are so generous. I mean, we went back this last summer, as as you just mentioned, and met Arjun's Nepali mom. And,
Hmm.
she doesn't have money. She works day to day construction, and she showed up with tons of gifts,
Yeah.
beautiful fruit from the marketplace and katas and all
Hmm.
kinds of these beautiful little gifts. And it's like she has no business giving us gifts, but that's just part of the generosity of people.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it does make you feel very special. And it makes you feel that connection even stronger.
Totally agree. And I think, another way that you've been able to give back to Nepal, and one for which I'm particularly grateful, is that you've, joined the board of directors at Z. And, I've really always appreciated your insight, both from your charitable experience, but also from your life experience and everything. You've been a really great addition to our Z family. So I do want to thank you for that, and for kind of paying it forward, and I appreciate you, spending a few minutes to talk to us. I also wanted to talk about the film that we're featuring this week, The Weight of Water, which is made by another close friend of ours, Michael Brown. And it did really well. It won the best film at Banff Mountain Film Festival this year, did a bunch of other awards. This isn't the first time you've been on screen. Your life story has been told in print and in media. Was there anything special, though, about this film for you? Did it make an impact in your life different than others? Or was it kind of just another highlight, of your illustrious career?
Kayaking was way scary for me, learning how to kayak. There are just so many questions that didn't have answers. And I'd listen to the river roaring below me and I would be really scared. Like, it would really affect my nervous system. It's just very overwhelming. And so, different from climbing, kayaking, you're just at the river's pace and you're riding this huge energy of, that you can't quite control. And it's just super fast. Everything's happening all at once, and and I can't see it coming. So it created a lot of fear in me. And so I think what Michael did was capture the vulnerability of that. And he did a beautiful job. What I kept trying to do throughout that journey was to stay open to the process, even though I couldn't see the future, just trying to stay open, trying to trust my team, and trust, what I'd learned over the last 6 years that I hoped would carry me through. But it was definitely kind of a faith journey. And I think somehow Michael captured that it's, if I just crushed the Grand Canyon, with like a fist bump, I think it would have been a boring film. But because I was getting destroyed in some of those rapids, I think it makes it more human for us all. And this process where you just kind of keep an open heart and you try to push forward using the skills and the mindset that you have, but yet at the same time, most of the time you feel overwhelmed. And I've been on a search to try to get comfortable in uncomfortable situations.
Yeah, totally. Was it hard for you to be that vulnerable in such a public forum? Was it hard for you to be that vulnerable on film?
Well, maybe that's the advantage of being blind. I couldn't always tell when Michael had his camera shoved in my face. So, I'm probably an easier candidate to be vulnerable, because sometimes I'm just sitting there like facing the rock and like taking a deep breath and trying to get myself collected. And Michael's got his camera and I hear that little buzz over there. I'm like, oh crap. So, I think I'm a perfect candidate.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And I can see how kayaking might be scarier than climbing for you as well, right? Because in climbing, do you notice the exposure? Are there pieces of a climb as you get higher in it that you're aware of? Whereas in kayaking, I think you can tell much more obviously when you're in imminent danger, right?
Climbing's just slow, so a lot of times you're roped up or you're on a fixed line. I'm not like some kind of crazy risk taker. So, a lot of times I'm roped to other people. You're very methodical. You're moving up the mountain. You're feeling your way either with your hand or your ice tool or your ski pole or whatever it is. And kayaking is just totally different. Like the river, you can turn left, but the river shoves you right at that moment. There's this energy under your boat. And so you don't know now as a blind guy, I'm in the wrong place, right? And now I have to hammer like a really hard left. So you're constantly, it's way more intense in terms of like having to react and respond to things that you don't even know are happening at the time. So yeah, no, I found it way more intense than climbing.
Yeah.
Although
You know,
climbing, there's
something
more suffering in certain ways because you're hungry and cold, and the wind's hammering you, and you're scared that you're gonna, you
right.
gotta make every step count, but it's just a different animal.
Yeah, totally. So one thing that stuck out to me in what you just said is that you said that you're not a risk taker, but at the same time you're talking about kayaking blind down the Grand Canyon. Like, I think other people may have a different idea of risk. But just to kind of, I guess the last question I wanted to ask you is actually about the importance of taking risk in life. And right now, we're in this strange time in our generation where everyone's, like you said earlier, so isolated. We're kind of insular. Everyone's kind of hunkered down. Do you think that there's a place for risk right now in this current moment? And if so, what kind of risks should we be taking? What kind of risks are good for the world to be taking right now?
Well, I think it's a balancing act right now. Of course, we want to social distance. We want to do all the things that help society, because there is a big world out there, and we don't want to make people sick. So that's definitely relates to this idea that I am not a crazy risk taker. Just like, throw caution to the wind and go for it. That's I think a bad, unsustainable, mindset to have. It's reckless. And so I've never been that kind of reckless climber. I've always thought, okay, what do? You try to minimize risk by surrounding yourself with a really strong team, by preparing like crazy, and by trying to, get your body ready, but also your brain and your mind ready for that big journey. And then, kind of relying on trusting the process, right? And so, how am I going to turn bad things into good things? How am I going to sort of engineer my way forward? How am I going to work with my team to help, my strengths? How am I going to, not lose sight of wanting to impact the world in some way, big or small? I think for me, it's just understanding what the process looks like and having faith in the process. So, for sure. For right now, I think people are struggling, and maybe they're in a dark time. It's a heavy time. But if they can sort of look at their own journey as like personal growth, what's your covet story going to look like, right? Is it going to be like, I just squeaked out of this and, a little bit more damaged than I was before? Or can you change the narrative somehow to like, look, I'm going to grow from this experience, and kind of rely on what I've learned about this process of moving forward and trying to still do good work in the world. So that's what I'm kind of circling back to, this idea that like, we don't want to lose sight, I don't think, of our mission.
Yeah, totally. Well, I really appreciate that, Erik. One of the things I really enjoyed about, knowing you and working with you and our friendship is you have a great wisdom. I think that's been born out of the challenges that you faced and overcome in your life and your experiences. And, it's an honor personally to have you share that, with me. And it's an honor, for you to share that with the Z family in general. So,
yeah, well, the Z work is really impressive. You totally buy into this no barriers process. We have an amazing team, right, of board members, of staff, of you and Nepal on the ground, and we're doing incredible work. And so we have to sort of just believe even harder right now, I think, in the importance and the reality, the possibility of this process and what it can bring to people, because we will emerge out of this, and then we got to continue hammering. So I'm really glad I'm a part of it, and for the stuff that the Z Foundation does in Nepal is just incredible. For not that much money, we're doing incredible work, and you're seeing change and impact day to day. So it's an incredible formula.
Well, thanks, Eric. And that I feel like we've been training for 20 years in Nepal to be in a position to provide real direct support in these challenging situations. And what we're looking at right now in Nepal is the public health risks from COVID are not as drastic as they are in other places. But as soon as there's about 100 cases as of when we're recording this, and the public health system here will be very quickly overwhelmed. It's not going to take many more cases for that to happen. But the real damage that's happening is the economic issues. And a lot, as you mentioned, most of the people in the communities where we work are living hand to mouth. And so we're really trying to make sure that we're positioned as an organization, despite the really challenging times for fundraising and for everything, that we're able to help these people thrive and come out of this, like you said, hopefully stronger than we went in, but at least hopefully we can help them from not having to face issues like hunger and continue to live their lives to the fullest potential. And I really appreciate, Eric, you're a great inspiration. You're a great supporter for Z, and really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Cool. I hope people enjoy the movie.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. All right. Namaste.
I wasn't even in the Grand Canyon. It was all special effects.
Yeah, totally. It's all CGI, green screen.
CGI.
Which is actually what's happening right now. You're not actually in your kitchen, are you?
No way. I'm on a mountain skiing right now.
Totally. On a gondola.
In my brain, in my mind.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
I'd like to thank Erik for his time and all his contributions to the Z Foundation, for sharing his thoughts with us tonight. We hope you enjoyed the interview, and please visit zdzi.org for more information on how we're responding to the COVID crisis in Nepal and how you can get involved. Thanks.